Hi guys, Adam McCubbin here. Super excited to share with you this episode today. I hope you get out as much information as I did doing this interview. A lot of preparation, effort, and work goes into each episode, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to this episode. Plus, if you want to leave a comment below, ask any questions, I'd be more than happy to get back to you. Just a quick announcement, this show is now brought to you by MYPROTEIN. MYPROTEIN is an online company that sells supplements, training apparel, and equipment. It's a company that I've used for several years and highly recommend their products. I'll put a link to the website below, plus a 25% discount code if you'd like to purchase products from there. And without further ado, here's the episode. Okay, today we've got Dr. Roy Sugarman, who is a clinical neuro-psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and an expert in peak performance. He is the director of performance for EXOS alongside Nick Winkelman. He has worked at the elite level with the USA national teams as a mindset coach. He's a published author of 2 acclaimed books, Saving Your Life One Day at a Time, and my personal favorite, Client-Centered Coaching. I first came across Roy where he spoke at Nathan Quinn's Mindset and Performance Conference, who was also a podcast guest. And I must say, Roy made a huge impact on me as a coach and really improved the way I communicate and became sort of much more self-aware. So I'm really excited and honored to be able to spend some time with Roy today and share his insight. And I think the listeners will get a lot out of this podcast too. So welcome, Roy.
Good, thank you, Adam. It's great to be seeing you face to face.
Yes. So before we get into it, can we just get a little bit of a history on your career and I guess your humble beginnings, how you first started?
So is this the 4-hour podcast, or we're going to have to do this quickly?
Yeah. We've got as long as you want.
Yes, I've been around for about 40 years, and most of it, the first part of it was spent rehabilitating traumatic brain injury and working with people who'd been hurt in various conditions, you know, the military and sports people and whatever else. And they began to ask me a question, so can you fix brains that haven't been broken? What do you mean? You know, can you take good brains and make them even better? I said, yeah, sure, I can try. So that's what I got involved with, and that brought me into contact with a wide range of people, wider range than just the traumatically brain injured. No longer just BMX people coming off, you know, and being concussed, but now we get corporate leaders coming to me and saying, you know, I look after 500,000 staff and I'm burnt out and I think I need to build resilience, all kinds of things. And eventually it got me through working in the United States with United Health Group and Upton Behavioral Health Solutions and a whole range of people trying to keep people away from doctors. Yeah. So sort of help them get through daily life. And that's where the first book came from, which was Saving Your Life One Day at a Time, because obviously the modern world's a difficult place. Physiologically, genetically, we're not that well designed to live as long as we do. We're not that well designed to deal with the kind of stresses we do. Our body doesn't even recognize some of the stresses as being okay. It sees a lot of them as threatening. So that was the first lot. And then I began to realize that a lot of the problems I was dealing with in peak performance came out of this adversarial relationship that either general practitioners have with patients or personal trainers have with their clients or even coaches have with their teams. And people don't realize when you're telling people what to do all the time, when you have this mindset bent of like the military, is that outside of the military, nobody likes being told what to do. There's reactance theory that says, look, I don't like being even given suggestions about what to do. Never mind being told what to do. So eventually I was contacted by the people at what was called Athletes Performance, and they said, would you mind sort of helping us out with a mindset piece, because we have movement, we have nutrition, we have recovery, but our mindset piece isn't that good. That was about 10 years ago. And I joined what is now called Team EXOS, and as the director of applied neuroscience in peak performance in the performance innovation team. And it took off from there that I began to translate a lot of stuff into athlete-centered coaching, into client-centered training, to get people to do what psychology had learned, is that people don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
And what happens when we do that, is we create behavioral inflexibility. So what I had to do then was for the layperson, for the ordinary coach or trainer who's faced with one-on-one or faced with a team that they have to take over, is to understand that as trainers and coaches, we may create behavioral inflexibility. People may resist change simply because they're in a coaching or training environment, stuff which they actually want to do. They'll decide they don't want to do. And 6 factors that were beginning to come out of the second and third waves of what we call process-based, cognitive-based therapy or ACT therapy. And these 6 factors I began to address in my book called client-centered. So that's why it's client-centered. It's not about you as a coach. It's about you taking responsibility for what happens, but understanding you want to be client-centered. It has to be all about the client. They're the experts and so on. So that changed my whole career, to writing these books and going across to the USA to help train the U.S. national men's soccer team to go to the World Cup in Rio, and to train basketballers and NASCAR racers and PGA golfers and downhill racers and tobogganists and skeleton races. It just got very busy very quickly.
And so when you first started, you didn't, I guess, envisage that you'd be working in sports performance. It's just, I guess, like a natural evolution for you.
Sure. Well, the way I grew up was I was always playing sport, and I was a very good goalkeeper, playing in football and soccer. And then I went to the military. So landing up, and then I worked a lot in very big corporates as well, very, very big, so 60, 70,000 employees. So when EXOS approached me, I'd already been working with military sports and elite corporates. So it wasn't too much of a split. What the split was, though, was having to create something very new, because I didn't want to be talking psychology science in a way that people wouldn't understand or wouldn't get. So I had to translate what we were doing out of the realm of ACT and process-based CBT and so on, and bring in motivational interviewing and self-determination theory. And people like Nick Winkelman at EXOS began to pick up on it, and he did his doctorate, in that. So it took quite a bit, so much so that EXOS used to be movement, nutrition, mindset, recovery. It's now mindset, movement, nutrition. So mindset has become the biggest piece of what is now a $200 million business. And, I just watched that evolution as people began to translate mindset out of clinical psychology into everything that a coach does.
Yeah. Yeah. And so who were the early mentors, and I guess the people that sort of inspired you to go down that path? Is there specific people in mind that you think of when you think of how your career's evolved?
Well, I began to meet up with people like Paul Taylor and Ian O'Dwyer and Rodney Korn and Bobby Cappuccio, and heard about what Tom Myers was doing in fascia, and Gary Gray I knew about from a long time. And then there was a whole wide range of people like Dillman, who'd been going into complex movement in treating in dementia. And one of the first reasons I got to look at sport and look at equipment like the Vipers, for instance, and kettlebells, was I was looking for ways of replicating Tai Chi in a way, complex movement with a meditation. Mm-hmm. And if you look at that kind of stuff of Michael Delcourt and other people, and starting to travel, to Singapore a lot and meeting up with Michel Dan and all these kind of people, Marcel Dan, I think I just picked up on a whole range of things that people were on the borderline of applied neuroscience, but weren't actually going there, weren't actually really understanding the link between emotions, motor activity, and thinking and feeling, and knowing the difference between all of them, and beginning to work as allied health professionals rather than just, repetition counters. Yeah. And that's obviously, Bobby began to read stuff and talk, and, Dwyer began to look at stuff, and we began to talk more. And so, I began to work around what they were doing, but show them behind this was mindset. Yeah. And behind this was applied neuroscience. It's not a huge leap, but you need to make the connections.
Yeah. So moving into the topics of your book, can we start to talk about behavior change, and specifically why it's so hard? I think obviously working as coaches, we often get stuck in thinking solely the mechanics of training or weight loss or the specifics of certain things and then not factoring into how to actually get people to change on an emotional level.
Sure. And I think when people talk of emotions, they're actually talking about feelings. Emotions are deep, physical, non-conscious things. When you become aware of an emotion, it's actually your feelings. So emotions, your heart racing, you're sweating, this, that, and the other. Most of the stuff that's occurring in our brains is occurring in the first few 100 milliseconds, by which stage we've already attached meaning, emotional valence, we call it, or salience, to a thought, to a movement, to an action, to a reality. And this creates a whole range of behavioral inflexibility when it's in the wrong situation. So if we're in the wrong context, we start with things, experiential avoidance is the first one, where we try not to challenge our own image of ourselves by rolling over and not doing change. So instead of accepting, the burden of change, we get scared of it and we see it as difficult. And in fact, we almost immediately see it as a negative, non-consciously. We suffer from something called cognitive fusion, which really is a form of overthinking. People stay inside their heads and they derail their activities. They try and solve problems in their heads and get caught up in stuff and get into deep intellectual discussions instead of solving the problem through movement, for instance. There's inflexible attention. People get caught up in how they've failed across time or worried about where they're going in future instead of just working mindfully in the here and now. We have this attachment to our conceptualized self. We stick with an image we have across the years and we see that as a true rendition of who we are. That's rubbish. We can change in one day. Think of a death in the family, or think of losing a limb, thinking of winning the lotto, thinking of getting dumped by a girlfriend. These things change us almost immediately, forever. So we're not that stuck. But the big thing I discovered was, inaction, impulsivity, and avoidance created by the fact that people weren't in touch with their values. What is the value that makes you go to the gym? You want to lose weight. Well, first of all, that's impossible. You cannot lose weight by exercising because you're going to compensate by eating more, by justifying the crap you're putting in your body. You don't realize muscle weighs more than fat, so if you might change your body shape, so impossible things like that. And then people say, well, I want to get into the wedding dress. I want to lose 10 kilos. They've never lost more than 2 kilos their whole life. Yeah. Now it's 10 kilos. And then, of course, you try and train them to do unrealistic goals. So the value systems were so important. So the first thing I realized was so much is context bound. And the context that the personal trainer puts you into, because it's adversarial, because they're telling you what to do, because you're the expert in yourself, not the trainer, because the rate at which you want to change and how you change is really deeply personal and driven by value systems, that you're going to try and avoid any experience of change. I realized the personal trainers didn't have a clue. They'd never been to psych school, and even psychologists and GPs and other professionals weren't that good in recognizing these things were there stopping us from changing. So this was all just feeding into it. So I sat down to write the book, and I'd already looked at the idea of how people change their movement, their eating, the motivational patterns, their socializing, and realized we had a problem. I had to get people to be more accepting, to defuse their thoughts, to pay flexible attention to what is happening in the here and now, to be more flexible and exceed their own image without anxiety. Anxiety is normal and helps you drop out of the gym. And how to get coaches to recognize the emotional drivers were the value systems that committed people to action. Mm. And I got letters from people like Rodney Coyne or whoever it was from, I think, a guy in Canada saying he practiced this stuff for 1 year and he doubled his practice because people were now understood their values, they made contact with their emotions, and this committed them to plans of actions they stuck to. So that really covers what the book is doing behind the scenes. Yeah. In front of the scenes, really, it's just covering the chapter headings that you will see. Yeah.
And you spoke about before, like, how feelings are basically emotions. How do we get
perception of is feelings? Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we get athletes to take out their emotional biases and not letting their thinking take over and overrun the skill or behavior change that we're trying to implement?
Sure. So I think the first thing athletes need to realize is that emotions are motor activity. They're physical. And the way we translate these through areas like one of the big emotions is disgust, which is a self-referential emotion. It's different to the amygdala kind of fear-based stuff. And it sits there and it kind of makes us obsessive, or it kind of interrupts our attention and other stuff. So there's getting the athletes to understand that there are a whole lot of emotional drivers there that are really important comes out of the way we have conversations. So the way we overcome bias is to talk about them and have these conversations. And when we're aware of our emotional drivers, most of which are negative, we realize that's not going to get us from the C leagues to the A leagues. That we've got to be able to move forward in a much more positive way. That we've got to be able to build a trophy room that we go to when things are tough. That we learn to understand that anxiety, when you exceed your own limits, that normal anxiety created by negativity is actually natural, that you're going to be anxious when you move to the next level. So getting people to understand that those are the drivers is really important. So if you think about it, I was just calling up something around there. If you think about how do we do this, first of all, the interesting thing I find with athletes is that, like everyone else, is they don't expect to have these negative emotions when they're trying to succeed. Mm-hmm. They accept it's all plain sailing, accept the world is wonderful. So normalizing vulnerability, normalizing negativity, saying the minute we begin to push, there's going to be pushback, and you're going to start to exceed your own image of yourself. You're going to start to feel anxiety, and you're going to start to question the outcome. Mm. That's normal. To get them to accept that good things come and go, and that bad things come and go, that a negative thought, you can just observe it, check it out, let it go, get back to the mission. If you think of how we've always trained soldiers, look after the good stuff, look after the buddy next to you, stay focused on the mission. You're going to be scared, you're going to be afraid. That doesn't matter. It's still going to happen. You're not going to eliminate negative thoughts, but how you treat them, how you deal with them is important. And understanding your own positive drivers, your own emotional drivers, why you're doing this, helps you deal with the negativity. And staying aware of it and accepting that bad stuff comes, but your value systems, if you stick to them, they'll get you through training. And I'll give you a simple example. I have an athlete who's 17. She's a great downhill racer, but she's never worn stripper heels and platform shoes. She's never been to her formal, to her prom. She never gets to go out with the girls. You can imagine that she burns out fairly quickly, and then she just, I'm giving this up. 4 o'clock in the morning is not a time to be skating around an ice rink. Her value systems are not clear because she just liked the sport and it looked cool in a bikini. I don't know, she looked good in something else. So what do? We go back into her value systems and say, why are you here? What do you want to achieve? What are the deep, cherished ideals that will be met when you get to join the team, the Olympic team? Because they don't think about that. When you get committed to your value systems, then you can make sacrifices and you can do that. If you have a person comes into gym and says, I want to do gym to lose weight, the failure rate is so high, and you're going to be putting them into boot camp, which has to be, for me, the most terrifying aspect of facing anybody in my life. Mm. You do it better. For the athlete who's struggling, I say to them, when you go into the gym every 15 minutes, pick up 5 tennis balls and learn to juggle. Break up those horrible 2-hour training sessions into 8 by 15 and learn to juggle. It's really cool. How do we do it for them? We're facing a person on their first day of like a boot camp, and we're giving them kettlebells and TRXs and Vipers, and they're on a vibration platform. And it's not a pleasant experience, for heaven's sake. And then you've got this blonde, tan, 12-year-old PT telling them what to do and screaming at them. And in between saying, so how was your weekend? Shut up. It's just not a good approach. And it's ridiculous that we do that. So, we're sitting there counting the beeps going off, and we're looking at our mobile phones, all the crap. What is so nice is that you level that playing field. Every 15 minutes you take them away and you throw a tennis ball at them. You throw a small futsal ball at them. And you play catch and pass, catch and pass, catch and pass, and you talk. Suddenly there's 2 equals having a good time instead of a boot camp sergeant screaming at you. And when we began to evaluate people leaving the gym, those who were just under the pump for 45 minutes stayed in the gym an average for up to 12 weeks and usually left before they saw real change happening. Because, it takes 3 months.
Yeah.
We also found out that the brain can only see forward in 3-month bursts, so no point in setting goals longer than that. But the people who had their gym broken up into 15-minute sessions with catch and pass had about a 50% better view of the trainer than anybody else, and tended to stay in the gym for 2 years.
Yeah.
As opposed to less than 12 weeks.
And because they had that emotional connection, and they sort of saw their coach or their trainer as an equal rather than that drill sergeant you spoke about.
Yeah, and we'd rather, now there's something else called, something which I've introduced into an app which we built to reduce suicide around the world. It's called chain diffusion and modeling and relatedness, which comes out of self-determination theory and homophily. We like people who are like us. We actually don't like experts, especially Australians. We hate experts. You like everybody to be equal, and nobody should tell anybody what else to do. It's a big problem because everybody takes drugs because nobody wants to stand up and be the first one to say I'm different. So, why don't we? It's your shout. There's no ways you can't have a drink when it's your shout. We have a lot of pressures. So it's really important out of all of these things to say that we listen to people who are at the same level as us. We take instruction from people at the same level of us. And it happens in America too. When you level the playing fields, I'm not getting someone telling me what to do. I've got a friend advising me on how best to proceed based on what other people like as well. I'm being given menus of alternatives instead of being talked to by some superior, spray-tanned human being. If you go into most gyms, anywhere in the world, the average age is way below 40. The wealthiest, most useful clientele we could have don't come to the gym because they don't like a 25-year-old screaming at them for 45 minutes, whether they know it consciously or not, and it is the non-conscious bias. If you measure galvanic skin response and heart rate variability, the minute a younger person is screaming at you, you're not happy and you don't even know that. So for no good reason. But when that person starts playing catch with you, which is what Dad used to do, playing catch with you, which is what you did with your friends, suddenly you are much more receptive to being told what the hell to do with a kettlebell and being corrected when your form isn't good. So we take the sting out of adversary. And we say, I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm this guide by the side. And that makes a difference to your income by about a factor of 50%.
Yeah.
If somebody just feels that they're still in charge, that they're defining the relationship, that they're the experts in themselves, and you become the expert because I invite you to be the expert.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, and I think that's powerful, as you mentioned before, is giving the clients or the athletes options, and you might be there, as you said before, the guide by the side. You can guide them. Can you talk about the difference between, I guess, guiding and then telling? I know we've sort of spoken about that for the last little bit, but just to dig deeper on what how we could use that as well.
Well, first of all, if you're telling people stuff, you're not a good coach. Good coaches ask a lot of questions. They don't say a lot, and they don't tell a lot. And why I say this is important is based on all of our understanding of how people engage with change. One of the most important ways they engage with change is through values-based or values-committed changes in their actions. So what values they want to see in you are always going to be a curiosity about them. Good coaches are curious about people. And that's not curious, when a person of 45 comes into the gym, you don't have to say, how was your weekend? What did you do amazing? What was the highlight of your weekend? The chances are they did nothing because they're 45 and they're married and they got kids and they went to birthday parties and they spoke to boring people and they had a dinner with 8 people in a crappy restaurant. They're not 18 going out and getting laid and getting drunk and smoking amazing stuff and going to an incredible concert and having a whole rave. That could be the first time. Shut up, The question I want to ask was, what was not so great about last week? Finished 15 minutes where you saw for the first time a kettlebell, a power plate, and a TRX. Which was your favorite? which of the exercise did you really feel good in doing? And what was great and what was not so good? Those are the questions you need to check in. You watch a person doing a face pull and they're grunting. They don't like face pull. Is there an alternative, like, bent over rowing, that might achieve the same thing? So being a very keen observer and asking questions about how the person's experiencing this world is really important. You can't tell them anything because they're the experts in how they're going. And quietly you can just get rid of exercises when you see them saying, wow, that was hard, or this is difficult, or what, are you trying to kill me? Take it personally. Get rid of the exercise.
Yeah.
If they want it back, they'll tell you.
And I think that's where a lot of coaches go wrong. It sort of becomes that egocentric, you're coming to me, I'm the expert, I know the best exercise to give you, and then your drop-off rate might be exponential compared to the coaches that are listening to what you're actually saying.
Over your lifetime, we found it was 3 out of 4. You're going to lose 3 out of 4 people for reasons that you don't understand. And it's a very competitive business. The average, time spent in the industry is 18 months for a new graduate. One of my third cousins actually is Kevin Kalinka, who does AIPT. Think of the thousands of people they train every year. Can we follow up and see how many actually stay in the industry? The answer is it's a job and not a career for most people. When they start to introduce and this is where Bobby and everybody else has kind of copied from my book and taken it, integrated into their practices, which is what the 3rd edition shows how Rodney and Bobby have adapted this stuff. Suddenly you have a career because you're now engaged in human behavior, which is a good career. I don't think personal training it's a job. Behavioral change is a career because there's learning, there's novelty, there's growth, and there's retention of your clients. But more than that, you actually see the effects of what you're doing all the time, and people start to the feedback starts to get so much better. I think that's tremendously important. I think the whole idea of how we motivate people, we become allied health professionals as personal trainers instead of just being PTs. And there's a difference there.
Yeah.
I went to there's the big meeting in Los Angeles every year. We go to the Health and Record Club, big meeting, $1 million stands and whatever. There is not one piece of equipment for the elderly. The biggest demographic of the people who need personal trainers the most are just not there because it's not a comfortable environment. Where the hell is everybody at URSA? And I walked around saying, what have you got for the elderly? Nobody had anything except for Jungshin sword fighting, sword fitness, designed for the elderly, to engage the elderly. Don't give granddad a gown and slippers for Christmas. Give him a wooden sword and a year's tuition.
Yeah.
Doing Jungshin, which is incredible. And nobody who does Tai Chi and this kind of thing like Jungshin will ever get dementia.
Yeah.
Complex movement with, there you have. Who wouldn't want to be a personal trainer with a career of preventing dementia?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah, very cool. And I guess it comes back to that, what you spoke about before. You need to be on the level. And, if you go into any big commercial gym, it's not a place where like an elderly person would feel welcomed. Sure,
and you don't feel it's like elderly people don't have sex. Of course they do. Why don't they have sex? Because it's the same reason they don't ride a bicycle. A, they might not have a bicycle. B, they might be scared of looking stupid. C, they're scared they might hurt themselves. They might fall off the bicycle. But you're looking around and everything represents what you're not, what you are no longer. So where is the thing where particularly you could master it? And sword fighting is a great equalizer. I could fight any youngster and I would be able to defeat them because it takes years of experience. I did Iaido, Kendo, Jungshin. This is the point, The gym is not an environment, and context is everything. So for anybody of every age, can you create a context where the person would feel at home, even in your average buffed up fitness first? That the person could walk in and actually feel good because every exercise was tailored for stuff that is of incredible value to them and that they can really look good at doing.
Yeah. It's powerful. One of the parts in your books, and I quote here, you say the number one coaching addiction is dependency, where we all want the client to depend on us and to make us as coaches to feel important. Can you just talk about the trap that is for coaches?
Sure. Whenever I get an athlete, going up in front of the microphone on the podium and saying, I owe everything to the coach, that means it was all about the coach. It was not about them, and that's never sustainable. So for a coach to say that a client is hanging on every word, an athlete depends on them, hangs on every word, it's a great drug for the coach, and it is a no growth for the person who needs to change, because they will never bring up that there is something else, there is another goal, or there is another emotion, there's another value which is important to them. This is all about the coach's values. And it's something we really try to avoid. Working with Steve Hecht in baseball in America was really important to avoid the whole idea that it was all about the mechanical stuff and the mechanical skills. It really is all about the mindset. People will build their bodies and build their minds incredibly if there's a good relationship with the coach. And dependency is what we call a complementary relationship. There is rigid complementarity, and that means nothing's being done. The coach is defining everything that happens within the relationship, including failure. Whereas we want a symmetrical or parallel relationship, where sometimes the coach is in charge and sometimes the client is. So dependency for me shows me there was a one-sided relationship, which may be really addictive for the coach and will get nowhere for the athlete.
Yeah. And I guess on the other side of that, can you explain also for coaches why it's important for also the coach to take responsibility for the outcomes and not playing the blame game
Sure.
if they didn't listen to us, or it's easy for us to dismiss and say that the client is not doing the right thing and they're not the right fit for us, and sort of taking the easy way out.
And I bring this up very early in the book because it's an incredibly key point. And we're talking about failure here. If the person fails, it's because they lacked faith or they didn't listen or all this kind of thing. Even some religions will tell you, well, why did this terrible thing happen? Because your faith wasn't strong enough. So the first rule is I never want people to have faith in themselves. I want them to trust, based on their successes and performance, that they can face the challenges. Because belief is a faith system that collapses when things go wrong. So the first point of taking responsibility is to get the client to actually trust themselves, trust their value system, trust their track record. The second thing is that even if, as a coach, you're not responsible for the failure, it is better to take that responsibility, because then you can do something about it. If you don't take responsibility, even if the client didn't come often enough, even if they didn't do what they were supposed to do, you can create a really adversarial relationship by, dumping on their heads. It's better you take responsibility, you avoid the client feeling negative about anything, and at the same time you then take responsibility for the resolution, for the solution to the problem, in which case the client is more grateful and more engaged. But to say to the client, had you listened to me, did I not tell you so? Well, the pathos of that is not such a good look. It is much better to say to, I had a teacher recently I was talking to, and they said to me, they can do nothing with the class because the parents phone them and they say, my kid's not learning anything, this, that, and the other. And they say to the parent, your kid is bloody disruptive in class and that's why they're not learning. Instead, I asked them to take responsibility by saying to the parent, you're quite right. I haven't yet worked out why your kid has to be so disruptive. I have not learned why your child is being so disruptive. And the second I solve that problem, I'll be able to teach your kid. But I'm sorry, until I learn why your client why your kid has to be so disruptive. And I often say to my own clients, I'm sorry I failed you because I haven't worked you out yet.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't make it easy for me, but that is not a good thing to point out to them. It's much better to keep on taking responsibility and say, you haven't lost weight and I haven't figured out why yet, but I'm gonna work on that until I fall over. So don't give up on me, and I'm sorry that I haven't worked out why you're not losing weight. The fact you're eating 2 muffins a day when you finished your 120 calorie workout and you're getting 250 calories in of sugar and fat, never mind.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah.
What I will say is I have not yet motivated you to eat clean, to go ketogenic, to do all of the stuff you should be doing, which is not really my job. But if I deal with your mindset in the gym, you will want to go out and eat better.
Yeah.
So I'm failing you in some level.
Yeah. And I think that it evokes the sort of trust and the human element of you saying, I haven't got the answers, as opposed to playing the blame game, and they would feel inadequate and go back to that whole paradigm of, being the sage on the stage.
Sure. I mean, they need to know that you're an expert, and you give your expertise when they allow you to, when they invite you in. But the important part of that is to say, I'm not giving up. I haven't yet worked out why you're not succeeding, but I will. And of course you need to. You need to go and read books. You need to go and phone the Dwyers of the world and say, what am I doing wrong? You need to be getting hold of your buddies who trained you and saying, why is this client, keep on landing up with a left SI injury? Why is the tensor fasciolata not doing well? What the hell's going on with iliacus and psoas, You need to learn all of that stuff. And if this patient keeps on coming back to you, the client keeps on coming back to you, you have to, it's a problem to be solved. But you take responsibility and you tell people, I'm not going to stop until I've solved this.
Yeah.
I will not quit onto your kid. I will not quit on your kid until I understand why he's a little shit.
Yeah.
That's really an important part of it is I'm not saying that he's failing because he's a little horrible character. I'm just saying that I haven't figured him out yet.
Yeah. And you've got to have that level of, I guess, humility to be able to say that. Yeah.
Gym. It's your gym. Whatever fails in that gym is your failure. I don't care how poorly motivated the client was, there's ways to motivate them. I don't care how old and infirm they are, there are ways to build up their strength. I don't care that you ain't got the right equipment, go and buy some or make some. There are balloons that can be blown up that will work a lot better than a lot of stuff you do. Got all these fancy boxes in the gym and all this fancy equipment. It's amazing that Jack LaLanne and other people who build amazing lives and bodies never had one of those bits of equipment. When you go to Ursa and you go to other places, always this new piece of equipment that is replacing the relationship with the PT. You should be able to take someone through 45 minutes of high-intensity interval body weight training and have them think it was the best day of their life. Then you're a good coach.
Yeah, not relying on extraneous machines and bands and all that sort of stuff.
Great to have. I love Vipers. I love kettlebells. TRX is my best. But they don't replace what my PT does when I limp in there with my right or left SI joint out of whack and I'm skewed. I don't even trust a physio to do that. I trust a personal trainer to do that.
Yeah.
And why? Because the physio may draw on their training. The PT is going to draw on his or her observation.
Yeah.
And that's very different.
Yeah.
I see so many physios opening the laptop and for half an hour they're asking people how much they drink. Instead of getting their hands on the person and watching them walk, which is where I see. So I see personal trainers and coaches being able to do a better job than many allied health professionals do at the moment. And not only that, I think so many physios will treat you from damage to being okay. Personal trainers will take you from damage to being spectacular, which is, I think, really awesome. When we get away from being clinicians and we get into being coaches, things start going a lot better.
Yeah, that's a great answer, powerful message on that one. Can we move on to just the concept of stages of change and the complexity of it? I think we often as coaches simplify this and don't put enough importance and think it's easier for someone to change, whether it's an athlete or client, than it really is.
Sure, well, change doesn't happen. We don't go from A to B. And even people, there's a huge gap between people, what they express in terms of their commitment and what they actually will do. So we take a very strong commitment as an indicator that people are going to go ahead and comply and do. It's nothing like that. And we take the idea that people can go from 90 kilos to 80 kilos. It doesn't matter. They're not going to do it. Human beings move slowly through change. When I ask groups all the time, my favorite question is, how long do you think it to change a simple habit, right? Like drinking more water. Everybody goes, 21 days, 10 days, 21 days. we did that in laboratories. We did that in the workplace. It's 200 to 300 days just to increase your water intake, because there are habits that you have to break and there are new habits you have to make. Much easier to create a new habit. So the point is this: when people come to you with habits that have led to them being overweight or unfit or old, and being old is a habit, it's an accumulation of a lot of bad things. When that happens, it's because change happens in a series of events. If we look at going from A to B in one thing, we destroy our motivation. Our brain says that's all too hard. And if the goal is more than 3 months in the making, we don't have that much frontal lobes. We run out of frontal lobes at about 12 weeks if you're a healthy 33-year-old. A youngster's got a couple of weeks maybe in their head, and an older person might have, 2 months ahead. So if we can change up, we can give them new programs, we can make sure they're not laboring under an old program for more than a few weeks, and we can think about it, taking them through where their competency is, and then gradually stretching them. So what I like to do with clients, every 3 months, I take them back to the first training that they did, the first weights, the first everything. And what they sweated through 3 months before, now they just nail it. You say, there we go. You just finished your first training session. Although it's your 55th, look how easy that, look how, go to them every week. You've got the figures on your iPad. Show them how they've from a 5 to a 10 to a 15 to a 20 kilo. They forget. Show them how many more reps they did, what their heart rate was doing. People need to see this passage of change going, and people will come to you and say, I want to lose weight, I want to get fit, whatever else. That doesn't mean that they do. It means they're aspiring to, but they haven't set the goals, and they haven't looked at how difficult it is, because if they did, they would realize they're not going to see results in the first 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So we need to work on the motivation of, we must assume that people are very poorly motivated, that they probably won't keep with it, that they don't like taking instruction, that we need to be some kind of expert only when they're really asking us to be, and then we need to be able to assess that, which is what Rodney and Bobby and others have done. But more importantly, we need to take them through the process that change is hard, and inevitably our bodies experience change as being negative. How does the PT become this immense source of positive energy? They look at the stages of change, and they take us very slowly through the small bits of goal setting. Baby steps, small changes make a big difference. These need to be the war cries. And not only that, there is evidence-based training. There's training-based evidence. What has the person learned about doing push-ups, about doing bench press? What do they understand by these things, and why would they want to avoid certain things and do others? Everybody wants to crunches. I've been through 12 years of personal training at the hands of people at Primal Fitness, at the hands of geniuses like Michael James and Aaron Callahan, and coming down the line, Saxon Dunworth and Ian Burr and all of these people, Yanni Hutner, and all of these people have gone out into the world now and done their own things, and I have yet to do a crunch. I have abs of steel and never a crunch inside. How did that happen? In fact, I've never done a stomach exercise. I've never been told to hold a plank as long as I could. Where did that happen? Well, maybe it was in the Vipers, the kettlebells, the TRXs that I got to do that. Bench press, not so much. Occasionally because, I've done a few bench presses along the way, but not so much.
Yeah.
I've got entire rugby teams now to never do another bench press in their lives, because unless the roof falls in on you, when are you going to lie on your back and push people off of you? Maybe in the bottom of a scrum, but I wouldn't recommend it. Try lift a 340-pound athlete off you. Not so good. We've got entire teams who will never do a bench press again. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Push-ups and bench presses, no. So, if we think about the little things that make a big difference, and we think about changing it up and keeping people engaged with novelty and complexity, we just read the book and understand how human brains work. We like complication. We like novelty and complexity in small doses. That helps us motivate and stay interested in our PT. The biggest reason we leave our personal training or the gym is boredom or injury.
Yeah.
Those are avoidable.
Yeah. And when we speak about motivation, so digging deeper on that, we need to obviously work out what the emotional drivers are for that client or athlete. What are, I guess, are the questions and how are the phrases? I know you spoke a lot about this in the book, but what type of questioning and language do you use as a coach to get, I guess, to dig deep and understand that person?
Sure. So what I do is I ask them for their, the purpose of being there. Actually, it'll come out as a few goals, most of which are unrealistic. But let's ask them, why are you here and why you want to be here? So let's say they say, I want to be here to lose some weight, to look a bit better in clothes, to be a bit trimmer, to have more vitality when I feel in the morning. It's important to then say to them, I use 4 questions, D, A, R, and N. So the first thing I want to ascertain is, how desirable is this goal of yours? On a scale of 0, if it doesn't happen, who gives a damn? And 10, I will die if I don't achieve this in the next 12 weeks. How desirable is it? If people can't give it better than an 8 out of 10, they're not going to succeed. So first you establish how desirable, how evocative, how emotion-provoking is this desired change. The second thing is to look at, what is their perceived ability? What do they trust, or what are they trying to believe in that is going to happen? Where 0 is, I don't have a chance of making this weight loss. And 10 is, I have always nailed this and always will nail it. And if they don't get above an 8, they're not going to succeed. So what do you do? If there's a low D, low desirability, the first thing we know is they haven't worked out the reasons why they want to do it, or the emotional needs that would be met by succeeding. So if there's a low D, all that's going to happen is that they're not really committed to do this, but they think they should, or the doctor told them to. So they're going to drop out. The second part of it, the perceived ability, the A, if that is low, it's because they're looking at the big picture and they need to make small goals. So the perceived ability is, based on how you've succeeded and failed in the past, do you think you can manage this? That's a 10. Or do you think you got no chance? That's a 0. Most people will come up with a 4 because they're looking at a 10-kilo weight loss. They've never lost more than 2 or 3. So now we have to say, let's get you to 2 or 3, which we know you can do. Let's get you to that as quickly as possible. Then let's reevaluate, because, of course, you're going to hit a plateau. Then you're going to reevaluate the goals. So not smart goals, smarter goals. Evaluate and reformulate if you have to. So now you've got the D and the A. If the A is low, I mentioned 2 things. They haven't got reasons, practical reasons. I'll fit better in clothes. It'll cost me less. I'll eat less. I'll eat healthier, whatever. That's okay. They can probably come with 3 or 4 reasons. But what emotional needs will be met by changing? So, for instance, I mentioned in the book a lady who wanted to lose an incredible amount of body weight to fit into her wedding dress. When it turned out to her emotional drivers, it was really, this girl played with Barbie dolls her whole life. She met her Ken and she wanted to be Barbie. It was not going to happen. This girl was like 5 foot if she was a day. I think 4 foot. She was never going to lose that weight. She would have died in losing that weight. It was impossible. Could have sent her to, a concentration camp, boot camp, and she would never have lost weight. But what we did get was we did get some weight loss out of her. She had bought a wedding dress from China that she would never fit into unless she died and decomposed.
Yeah.
It was that small. So we put in some panels so that she could fit in. And what we did was we gave her really stripper heels, 13-inch heels to walk down. She looked a lot taller, a lot thinner. She looked as much as Barbie as 4 foot nothing could look. Still overweight, but at least we understood what the drivers were. And with the help of a good seamstress and the help of some good stripper heels from the local pole dancing academy, we got her down the aisle looking a bit like Barbie. And as for Ken, believe me, I don't know where she got the Ken from. He was no Ken. He looked like he should go to the gym for 12 weeks before.
Yeah.
So, the point is this. Everybody has deeper. The one guy said to me he wants to be fit and stronger. Why? He wants to make more money. Because in his industry, the fitter, the stronger. So most people would have said, well, that's cool. I asked him, what's the money going to do? He had never told anybody, but he wanted to get into politics. He wanted to use the money to buy his way in, to be able to take people for dinner, virtually. He needed money to sustain, he was a member of this young liberal group. And he needed the money, but he needed the power. And then why did you need politics? And what do you want to achieve? And, you're going way down below just losing weight. You're going to incredibly highly driven political ideals of looking after, a liberal economy, a liberal group, getting gay people married. All of these kind of things was so powerfully built into his gene. It wasn't about losing weight. It's about changing the world.
Yeah.
And if you didn't understand that, he'd been to 4 or 5 trainers before the trainer that he then met up with, who got this all out of him. And when I went to England now, he was living there. And the first thing he saw me on Facebook, I was there. He had to see me and tell me how well he was doing and the influence he had on a lot of things, including Brexit. So emotions are the reasons why we do things. And if you think of the word emotions, it also comes into the word motives and motor and a whole range of other things. So, yeah, our motive for doing stuff is emotional. If you don't engage with that, you don't have a client.
Yeah. And what you just spoke about.
You cannot not train emotions. People say, no, I don't train emotions. I train biceps, triceps, and serratus anterior. No, you don't. You cannot not train emotions.
Yeah. And what I think is powerful about that story, as you were speaking about and you talk about in the book, is being intrinsically motivated by something. And obviously he had a deep desire that something was sort of bigger than himself, and he was sort of intrinsically driven to do that. And I think a lot of times with parents and coaches, we can try and extrinsically motivate our clients or our athletes, and by saying, to our kids, I'll buy you the latest Michael Jordan sneakers if you shoot X number of points. Can you just talk about why, I guess, the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and why that can be a bad thing as well?
The big one is, and I talk about it in the book to a certain extent, the big one is the concept of mastery. Mastery is the amount of time and trouble it is put into something to get really, really good at it and to get better and better at it. When we just talk about extrinsic motivators, fame, fortune, sex, whatever, that gets people to a certain level, but it doesn't enhance their sense, the desire for mastery. You don't really want to get better and better. You just want to reach a certain ceiling. Whereas there are a lot of people saying, why does a businessman necessarily make money, but it's never enough? They make enough money for them and their children and grandchildren, great-children, for 10 generations never to work again, and they still go and try and make more. And the answer is they're driven by a sense of getting better and better continuously. By mastery, they get into one business, they nail it, they want the next business, they want the next. Sometimes they'll end up ruining themselves, financially, emotionally. I had a guy recently who was about to sell for $400 million and was having a nervous breakdown because he was just kept on building and building and building. He didn't need the $400 million. His goal originally was like $12 million, but he just kept on going, and it ruined his life, So mastery is really important. Intrinsic motivation is driven by the need to nail something and keep on nailing it and keep on doing it better and better and better. You can see this in a person who's got to a certain level at the gym and then gets a hip injury or pulls psoas or, does something, and then they get so miserable because it's not a matter of they can't train. It means that their growth is not sustainable. People reach a ceiling, they drop out. So it's important. I think at Primal Fitness, where I go every week, I'm on program number 96 or something. So my personal trainers have come up with 96 different programs across the years so that I never have to go back and do the same stuff again. And all of a sudden I'm jumping on boxes or I'm doing something silly with I don't know, Indian clubs, which I never did before because they know novelty, complexity. I'm not going to pull a sled every week or do battle ropes every week. No, I have an A, B, and C program, and they run me through those, and I go through those 3 times, and then there's a whole new program. And it's congratulations, Monday we're starting you back on a new program. Now it's completely different. Suddenly, I'm doing 9 exercises with only Vipers, one after the other. Or suddenly I'm doing an EST or something else. So this is the idea of mastery, which means I keep on doing stuff that's different. There is novelty and complexity, and I keep on nailing that, so my sense of achievement is intrinsic to me. I'm getting better and better at doing what is important to me, and I'm doing it in the presence of people who think like I do. And that is the key to self-determination. Doing what you love, getting better and better because it's important to you, and nailing it with like-minded people around you. There's nobody who actually comes to my gym or who trains people in my gym that I wouldn't be friends with or enjoy going out for dinner or drinks with. Because they're all like-minded people. The way the gym is set up, the way that Aaron Keller and Michael James, people like this, have set up the gym, in collaboration with the Dwyer and everybody else along the way, has been to set up gyms where everybody feels they're like-minded. And therefore we're like Cheers, the Cheers bar. Everybody knows your name. I recognize everybody because I've been seeing the same faces for 10 years. And when we go to a pub to say goodbye to a trainer or have a Christmas party, these are really nice people that you really want to be friends with.
And I think that comes back to that, doing stuff because you love doing it. And it's like, a lot of, I guess you spoke about the businessman. He does that because that's what he enjoys and he wants to get better. And you want to go to a training environment where you enjoy yourself and it's not something that has to be extrinsically pushed on you.
Well, if it's pushed on you, it has a limited lifespan. And here's the story. I recently supervised a PhD student. It's taken, like me, 15 years to get through 5 degrees. And he's now got the PhD, defended the doctorate, got the doctorate, and then had a nervous breakdown, literally became depressed, miserable, anxious, despondent. Because when we went through why this person got the PhD, none of it was their own reasons. None of it was their own motivation. We now had to spend hours going through why this was now a valuable achievement because of what they would do with it going forward. But there was no sense of intrinsic design. There was no sense of being passionate about it because it was something that was driven by what was important to you. It was so important to other people, so important to his parents, so important to his own trainer. If I take this thing and I put it up here, right, it isn't going to last here because there is dog who's going to come and get this. This dog is determined and this dog doesn't know why it's meaningful to it, but this dog just knows it because that's a dog who knows how to switch off my laptop.
That was awesome.
If I don't grab the dog paused my laptop to switch it. It knows what to do. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
So this is Millie. So Millie's motivation is intrinsic to her. She didn't learn to play with the rope. If I wanted to sit, if I wanted to do stuff which is not within her natural ambit, I've got to use extrinsic motivators, treats and rewards. To poop outside, to sit and give me her paw, she needs extrinsic. But that rope inherently, I never had to teach her what to do with that rope. She's going to spend her life trying to undo the knot and to try and get the ends out because for some reason that's what doggies do. So that's the difference between an intrinsic and extrinsic. She intrinsically will play with that rope till hell freezes over. But if I need her to sit, stand up, go and poop, I have to reward her extrinsically. Now, why would that make sense to human beings? Why would I need to pay them or do stuff? So imagine if you're an athlete in college getting all these rewards because of girls and money and this and that. You now go pro and you're getting money and this and that. You forget that you used to enjoy playing that game, which is how you got good at it. So to motivate a team that's going to the World Cup, where getting that cup is so important, you have to be very careful not to let them get distracted by that extrinsic label. Look at what Croatia have just done by being intrinsically motivated. Amazing. They didn't for the extrinsic. There's no way as you work like that for extrinsic motivation.
Yeah. I've heard you on another podcast talk about a story of, I'm not sure what athlete he was and how he was intrinsically motivated to earn money, but it was to reward members of his family. I'm not sure whether you remember that story. Would you be able to just run us through that one? I thought that was a fantastic way to sort of illustrate that.
Sure. So, if you're working with various athletes, especially those, why would I enter the mainstream? Why would I go through the combine and the draft? And obviously the attraction of money was really important. But when you drill down below that, it wasn't about the money. It was about elevating family, about training people, empowering people, getting people to college degrees by changing the whole cultural makeup. So looking at a family that's been on welfare for 3 generations, and all of a sudden you're going to play for money, but it didn't matter. And this athlete would often take much lower amounts of money, but with a more guarantee that they could keep going. And when you went to see where they lived, they still lived humbly, didn't drive a fancy car. It was all diverted. So you could say the person was motivated by money, but it was what the money could buy for them. One of the great soccer players I worked with was a goalkeeper they were about to go into the Olympics. All he had to do was keep a clean sheet. And in the last minute of the extra time added on for injury, one of his players headed the ball back. It rolled, hit a clump of dirt, and went over his shoulder into the goal. 1-0. That was it. They're not going to the Olympics. But for him, his coach said, well, we don't want you to play for the next 3 weeks. You're so upset, whatever. For him, it didn't really matter because that wasn't what he was playing for. He remembers his mother being the defender of their family. He remembers her refusing to take money from the dad when she divorced him and working 3 jobs to put 6 kids through school and college. She was the defender of the family. He was the defender of his team. The failure, the going or not going, as long as he could get into that goal every day and defend his team, he didn't care what happened after that. And he's become really the most amazing goalkeeper on the world stage. But that was his motivation. So being able to deal with failure really depends on how amazing your motivation is to keep going. So Winston Churchill said, motivation, you prove it if you can go from failure to failure without losing your motivation. One of my friends, well, he's been bankrupt 14 times. His daughter describes how sort of every Monday they'd be out on the pavement with somebody picking up the TV and taking it out. And then he would phone and he'd say, hey, I just lost that, blah, blah. And he would borrow money. And he could borrow money because he had looked after so many people in his business career that there were just endless people that he could phone who would now say to him, listen, dude, I need money, and they would fund him. And eventually he made money and kept it because I think he retired, so he didn't get a chance to lose it all. But he taught her this incredible lesson. He just never lost motivation. But he was a great innovator, and a lot of innovation doesn't work. That's what he would tell her. Everybody wants innovation with a track record. He gave innovation with no track record, and he failed often. But every time he stood up, he had created such great relationships with people, motivated by the desire to help people grow their own businesses, that he often lost out on his own. And he often lent people money just to get them going, and he needed that money often in return. So if you live your life where you are tied into your emotions, your value systems, the stuff which will define how you can have grit, how you can be strong and reach your goals because it's based on what is vitally important, what is cherished for you, you will succeed eventually. But to go for the money, to go for the fame, it's not sustainable because when you do get it, you got nothing. Because nothing is tweaked inside you. There is no deep sense of emotional fulfillment because you weren't doing it for the right reasons. And that's terrifying for a lot of athletes.
Yeah. And I guess that this is related to people overcoming change and sort of digging deeper on to understand the emotional drivers, but the importance of self-image and self-concept and efficacy, I think is probably one of the most important messages, I think, for the listeners. Can you just talk about self-image and self-concept?
Sure. Going down to the roots of human consciousness at the neurological level, is consciousness is built up across time. Every single thing you've done in your life, every single thing you've eaten, spoken, done, acted, bought, sold, has contributed to an image you have of yourself, of what you think you're capable of how you succeeded, of how you failed. It's your persona. It is what you understand of yourself. Now, when you start to try to achieve, whether it is weight loss or trying to go to Wimbledon, is you have to exceed the limits of this image. And the minute you do that, you become anxious because your body's aware that change equals growth equals anxiety. Change equals growth equals scared. Change equals growth equals danger. You are really ruffling the status quo. And you are now taking yourself out of everything within your experience. You're going into realms where there is something beyond your experience. You have to exceed your own self-image to succeed, which means you're going to feel anxious and you're going to have to deal with that. So coming out of acceptance and commitment therapy, coming out of these ideas that you have a conceptualized view of yourself based on history, you have to get into the here and now of what's happening. And you have to be open to the fact that you're going to experience a whole range of negativity. And it's going to come and go. And as you stick to your value systems, which direct your actions, you're going to be able to accept this anxiety, overcome this anxiety, and not lose motivation because you're driven by the right stuff, by your values. And that means you're much more open to dreadfully scary experiences. In other words, you understand, I'm going to go into a scary world of the big leagues where I'm going to get hammered. And I'm going to enjoy it because I'm going to know that's in keeping with my values. I'm not going to lose motivation. So coaching becomes a complex way of getting people to accept that it's going to be difficult and committed to the value systems that keep them going, that drive them. And that's where the little girl has to realize she can't wear stripper heels and go to her prom if she wants to preserve her ankles and be able to do downhill racing. And if she can't work out a decent value system, and her value systems are taking her to the stripper heels, we have a problem.
Yeah.
And if the girl realizes the stripper heels are to get her recognized by her peers, to get support, to get guys to like her, to get herself noticed, that she can do that through her training and then some, and get a better class of guys.
Yeah. You spoke about before the importance of creating a warm environment for coaching. I guess for people that are listening, and you might not have control over your environment, or you might work in a big box gym, or you're being put into an environment that you might not have a lot of control over other than obviously the human connection and you coaching. How can, I guess, a coach create that warm environment? I'm sort of looking, from that point of view.
Sure. What I talk about is that within any environment, there is no fancy phraseology. There is no convincing argument you can make which is going to motivate people. There is no web of inspiring speech which is going to give people or create motivational, enhanced settings for people. It is about the warmth of the relationship that you create by connecting with people's value systems, by spending time on creating a warm relationship in which they can encounter their own resolve to change. And that warmth of that coaching relationship, being client-centered, is really important. I tell people of something my daughter experienced as a nurse working on a palliative care unit. She walks into a room where a client has just had their first chemotherapy designed to make them feel a bit better while they're dying. And the floor, the bed, the bathroom are covered in feces. And the client, her patient, is standing in the bathroom, shaking and covered in dirt and saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." What do you draw on in that moment? As the nurse supervisor said, watching her, she said, "You didn't look at the poop. You looked at the patient and said, 'It's okay. That's what we're here for. Let's get you cleaned up.'" You just focused on the client. It wasn't about the terrible stuff you were going to be doing for the next 20 minutes with gloves, a gown, a mask, and, biohazard waste cleanups, because a lot of these patients are terribly ill with a whole range of infectious stuff. She said you went straight for the client. And that's a warm relationship in which only the client matters. And that's where they encounter their own resolve to deal with the terrifying situations. You would think what nurses do in palliative care. They're not saving lives. Everybody dies often within hours or days of coming into the unit. And yet the family is always giving them chocolates and cards and saying, "You guys are amazing. You made the most terrifying environment warm, friendly. When we were crying, you sat and held our hands. When we was starving, you rushed down to the shop and got us some food. When my husband was dying and, wished he could have a hamburger, the dietitians in hospitals, not so much hamburger, you ran off down the road to the Hungry Jacks and came back with a, double cheeseburger. So if you think gyms are bad environments, what else? Within hospitals, within surgery rooms, within places, we always try to create a warm relationship where the patient can feel, even in the worst moments of the world, that they're not alone, that it is all about them and their well-being. And I give some tools in the book to be empathic, to be a listener, to be client-centered, or athlete-centered as we now talk in America. To be athlete-centered means you have created a warm relationship in which they will listen to you, in which they will stick with you, in which they will take terrible discomfort, in which they will wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the dead of winter to not let you down, even though they're feeling sick and then they're going to cough germs all over you. They're still going to do it because they don't want to let you down, because you've invested in them as a human being, and because they're now really aware of why they're doing it. And the minute the patient or client or whoever feels there is a warm, empathic, listening relationship, they will do things which are good for them, for you, and for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic answer. With that, you just spoke just about your daughter, and I've heard on another podcast that you did with Nathan the I guess the connection between parenting and coaching and being non-judgmental. What can you just talk on that and how you've, I guess, applied that to your parenting as well?
Sure. I mean, the parenting 101, from 0 to puberty, you have to tell them what to do and don't argue. If you say no, they need to understand the end and the that's it. But from puberty onwards, it's a negotiation. So the big goal for kids and for human beings is the first goal for any trainer, coach, psychologist, nurse is to respect empathy. That's fine. But what is that for? It's in the service of autonomy. So when you're talking to a teenager, their great learning experience to go from puberty to adulthood is to learn autonomy, how to guide their own lives by understanding what's important to them, by understanding their own values. So when a child is refusing to clean their bedroom or wants to go out to a party that's dreadful and is going to be closed down in 15 minutes because everybody's drunk and there's no security, or any of those things, or a patient who you're just telling you better take the antidepressants because they'll fix you, and if you don't, you're mad. You've got to respect autonomy, which means that they will fight you for no good reason as long as they get to guide their own lives. So respecting autonomy is vital. So for a teenager, they're not cleaning up their room because there is nothing that supports their autonomy in a clean room unless that's intrinsic to them. So sometimes I would fool my daughter by saying, oh, by the way, I think you should clean your room. Why? Oh, I've just invited your boyfriend for dinner and he'll be in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes' time, that room is clean. Yeah. Because the vital autonomy is the boyfriend should never think they're a slob. Dad and mom can think they're slobs. And I always say to parents, don't look at what your kids do at home. Don't look at the smelly pizza boxes under the bed. Ask the family and friends in school how your kids are lovely. You've done a good job. They don't have to clean the rooms at home. It's not an indicator. But when you hear a nurse complimenting your daughter, or when you hear a group overseas has said, we only want your daughter back to fix their user X because she's awesome, then you've done a great job. But the job was to respect their autonomy. Not to just say, it's very easy to say no. It's very easy to say you can't do it, but you're not respecting their autonomy. You need to have the discussion, a warm, open discussion with what is the rationale for doing or not doing what they do.
Yeah.
And clients all have an autonomy which is robbed by the complementary relationship, by the one-up, one-down adversarial relationship. And so as personal trainers or coaches, if we're going to violate autonomy, the first place to avoid that is with kids. You violate your kids' autonomy, that's when you can't trust them.
Yeah.
That's when they become difficult.
Yeah.
When I said to my 16-year-old daughter once, it's 1:30 in the morning, I'm on the phone, 1:30 in the morning, you should be home. She said, a curfew? We have a curfew? Every home should have a curfew. Then she burst out laughing and put the phone down. They never had curfews, They had this liberal, whatever, but fortunately they didn't land up doing, drugs that I knew about, or pregnancies that I knew about, or, crash cars that I knew about. I mean, I do admit I got a call from a woman with a Mercedes-Benz who said, I don't think your daughter's told you, but 2 weeks ago she smashed into the back of me. So I said, she says, I'm probably not going to tell my father. So when you phone him to claim the $500 excess, he may not know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So when she said that, I immediately knew which kid it was. And when I phoned the kid and said, I had a call from a woman with a Mercedes-Benz, she said to me, I don't want to talk about it. Take the money out of my account. Please don't tell me about it. It's too upsetting. That's how my kids were. So I don't recommend it to any parents, but from what I heard from the world, my kids did well. But I was aware all the time that I needed to respect their autonomy and not invade their lives, and that And here's the rule I always use. You are only visiting people's lives. You are not living it. So behave with respect and understand you're visiting lives. You're not there every day, up and down, for the 168 hours a week. You got 1 out of the 168. For the 167 that they're living, respect their autonomy and try and work within those boundaries.
Yeah. I guess that links nicely to the next question I was going to ask you about the 165 approach and how it's how being in contact, obviously you're not there for the client, throughout the 100 and whatever hours in the week, but can you just discuss that what you spoke about in the book?
Sure. Even with a group like Maslow in Seattle, Washington, in America and others, we've set up things like asynchronous and synchronous coaching. And on the web apps that we've designed in Mobicom, LifeIQ 1700 CD, I work now a lot in artificial intelligence, blockchain, and in creating apps that help people. I've created neuroscience models for how we change people's behavior using the internet, in diabetes, in health management, in work-life balance, and a whole range of other fields, and in suicide, which I'll talk about in a little while. It's fine to make an argument while you're with people, but if it's dependent on your coaching and dependent on your arguments, you've got 1 out of the 167, or if you see them 3 times a week, it's the 1653 rule. For that 165 hours a week, people are making the argument for why they shouldn't listen to you. They're getting out of the difficulty. They're getting out of all kinds of things. So I often say to personal trainers, why do you not catch up with people via text or via the internet, or go into One Foot Stop or something else, join One Foot Stop where you can actually be in contact with your clients 24/7. Because I get, for my own thing, I get a client or a friend. It's Saturday night, 8:30, and I'm in a restaurant. I get a text from a client saying, what do you reckon, the gnocchi or the deep fried calamari? In that moment, there's a warm relationship in which they feel comfortable enough to say to me, what should I be eating? And, I don't care. Eat what you like,
Yeah.
or what are you thinking about? Which way were you leaning? So in the spirit of motivational interviewing, I don't say the calamari, which is what I would do. I say, which way are you leaning? And they say, the gnocchi looks brilliantly fresh. I say, well, that's the way I would lean as well. I didn't tell them. But it was a warm relationship in which they wanted me to tell them to eat what they actually wanted to.
Yeah.
And that's how it works, I guess. So the idea of for instance, in dialectic behavior therapy, we often have to be available for 18 hours a day to a patient who may just have a wobbly at 7 at night, which doesn't happen to be in your clinical times. And it is difficult. It's a contentious issue. What is in scope and what isn't in scope? But sometimes people need to reach out. Now, that's where dependency is no good, and that's where having a warm, supportive relationship. Because if a patient phones me at 7 at night, the first thing they say to me is, am I interrupting you, and is it possible to talk to you, or should I phone back tomorrow? Because there's a respect, there's a distance, and they understand who I am, and I'm not their best friend. So yes, as a coach, you're not their best friend, but you are a trusted advocate. You are a trusted part friend, part practitioner, part scientist. And sometimes they do need to reach out to you, and they know you're there. So have a presence in their life. Give them work to do at home. Give them things where every day they wake up and think, what would Roy say at this moment? And that's how you maintain a presence, even if you're not at the end of a phone. You help them with problem solving, you help them with homework. Some way, create a presence for the 165 hours a week they're not with you. Otherwise, they'll be making arguments for why they don't want to do what you told them to.
Yeah. You spoke about it just before. There's obviously a fine line between being a coach and then also being that sort of friend. And how is that, I guess, a negative if you fall into that trap where you become more on a social equal and you become, I guess, friends as opposed to that sort of coach-client relationship?
Sure. That's why I don't ask them how was their weekend and what did they do on their weekend. I don't ask them. So I call it the silent cockpit. Now, in training pilots and in training airline crew, which I did for quite a while, I got involved with aviation psychology. We teach them about the sterile cockpit or the silent cockpit. When you're taking off for landing, You do not landing. That isn't about the wheels going down or the flaps and slats being extended or the autopilot being set or the altimeter being set. If you're just sticking to business, then you are actually the practitioner friend. And don't discuss the girlfriend. Don't discuss what they had for dinner. Well, that's up to them. So the context is really important. If they phone you on a Wednesday morning and say, I'm about to go for a run, but it's really cold and I don't feel like it, what do you think? Interval versus whatever. You tell them, I reckon the interval training is going to be a better bet for you. Do sprint walk until you can't breathe, and then do perfect recovery. Now, that's the friend they've reached out for, but the context and the conversation is that.
Yeah.
If they tell you I'm having a really hard time at work and I'm feeling stressed, what is your next question? Because if you're going to sit down, discuss their stresses and play psychologist, you're going to get caught up in stuff you don't want to be caught up in. But what would the personal trainer be advising a person who's stressed at work? There's a lot of literature on being sedentary. There's a lot of literature on standing up for 3 minutes. So here's a couple of exercises for you to do by your desk for 3 minutes every hour, and that's going to help your stresses. Are you drinking enough water? Are you staying hydrated? Have you downloaded a good meditation app? So you're not providing them with anything else except general advice that anybody would.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell them, look, you should be on a ketogenic diet. You have more energy and burn fat throughout the day. Of course, our problems will be less, because you may not know that's the case or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important as coaches. Know your scope of practice. Don't operate as a psychologist or a dietitian if you're not qualified for it.
Sure. So if people say to me, how do I avoid dementia? I will know that diet is really important in dementia. And I know that the evidence is going to be for a Mediterranean diet. I don't know what they're allergic to, what they're not, or what their calorie needs are, but I'll tell them, I tell you what, go find a dietitian, but ask them about the Mediterranean diet, because I know that's good for dementia, because it's in my field. I'm not going to discuss the ins and outs of what constitutes a Mediterranean diet or a ketogenic diet. And I worked with Tim Noakes, and I know what a ketogenic diet is. And I know how ketone bodies, how many there should be, how hard it is. And I understand all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to discuss it because my expertise is in getting the motive. It is up to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people say you work with so many teams. Worked with the coaches of multiple teams. I haven't worked with too many teams. It's the coaches who come to me for help, not the athletes itself. Worked with thousands of individual athletes, but not teams, because I work with the coaches so they know what to do in the scope to work with their groups.
Yeah.
And with multiple personal trainers all over. So the answer is what stays in scope, is the language of what would happen in the gym between you and them, but not what would happen outside of the gym.
Yeah.
And what they did on the weekend and whether they had a good time is irrelevant. The chit-chat, the social chit-chat should be replaced by catch and pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may ask them about their family background, but why do you want to do that? Unless it has something directly to do with personal training, such as their cardiac history, such as putting weight on and staying with weight. Because I know a lot of personal trainers who try to help people lose weight and never looked at their family. Go and look at the family portrait. There's not a person there who doesn't have a BMI of 142. There is in their families thin. We need to keep them fat and fit because they're never going to be thin.
Yeah.
Nobody in the family is like that, So, and I get a lot of referrals from personal trainers, and I refer a lot of people to the gym. And I refer them to personal trainers who understand motivational interviewing, self-determination, the difficulties of change, the value of an Oars approach to talking to people, and so on. And that's all within doing an interview, an intake interview, using a psychological tool is well within scope because you're doing it anyway. You're just doing it clumsily. Yeah. Organizing it around the Oars approach is great because we use it in the boardroom. We use it in any interview that will take place. It's not a psychological tool at all. It's a model for which a conversation takes place that is motivating, which is why I felt happy to teach people motivational science, because you're not doing what. Yeah. And PTs have told me on the intake interview, people have cried. What do I do when the client starts crying while talking about what weight loss will mean to them? The answer is pass them the tissues.
Yeah.
That's what a good coach is.
Yeah.
But don't ask, so are you depressed?
Yeah.
No. In scope is a tissue box.
Yeah.
Asking them why they're crying.
Yeah.
Last thing you want to do is become their shrink, their therapist, or their friend. That's not necessary. Whatever would pass in the gym for friendship is you pass them a weight, or they give you the weight, or you keep the weight clean and sterile. But no, you keep a sterile cockpit.
Yeah.
If it's not about takeoff and landing, you're being distracted.
Yeah.
And being distracted by psychological problems or body dysmorphic disorder is really dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful message, and I think the coaches and people listening need to obviously take that on board, because I think it's very easy as a coach to slip into that role of whether you think you can solve the problem that's not within your scope, but also fall into that sort of friendship model as well.
Look, it's very attractive to do that because you meet a lot of nice people. Everything's really cool. And I know a lot of personal trainers who've become very close personal friends with people they train.
Mm.
But they're an exception because they're really skilled at doing it. But sooner or later, if there is a conflict, whatever, you're going to lose a paying customer, or you're going to feel guilty about charging a paying customer, or you're going to try and discount it because they are a paying customer, whatever else. I've been looked after by Primal Fitness for at least a dozen years. What that would have cost me in personal training would be ridiculous had they charged me the going rate.
Yeah.
But there's a reciprocity there. So being reciprocal to other colleagues, looking after other colleagues will always send you their family, this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, there's a quid pro quo there.
Yeah.
And that needs to be the problem with being somebody's friend or being socially or this, that, and the other, is that sooner or later somebody's going to lose money. This is business. And being professional means you take what you're worth, you charge people what you're worth, and you don't let anything get in the way that would mean you are giving for less than you're worth.
Yeah.
Your mates' rates should never go below.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important advice. So we're drawing to the end of the interview now, and I've got a series of rapid fire questions that I usually ask my guests. You can take as long as you want, though. It's just so people can understand where you come from and just to know a little bit more about yourself. So first one is, what is your all-time favorite? It can be training book, self-help book, or anything that has, I guess, shaped you as a leader and a psychologist in performance.
So the best book I've ever read. Well, it's difficult because I'm an integrationist, so I put stuff together.
Yeah.
But the stuff written by our chairman in Arizona, Mark Verstegen.
Yeah.
His books have been amazing, and they're very small books, but they've really influenced. And what Mark has done across all time in turning EXOS from $1 million a year to $200 million a year business has been amazing because of that focus on the athlete. And even our wireless password at one stage was "to the athlete be true." Yeah. So anything that Mark Verstegen's written, that would be my favorite books that I've read.
Yeah, awesome. And do you have any phrases or quotes that you'd regularly say to your coaches you work with or to clients that you'd say?
The most frequent one, the most frequent. My mantra is, "I'm just visiting your life. You're living it, and I'm respectful of that."
Yeah.
I'm just visiting the life you're living. And obviously I'll never know everything as well as you do. So I think the great rule of deference, of respecting autonomy, is that phrase, "I'm just visiting your life, you're living it."
Yeah.
It keeps me humble.
Yeah.
I wear 2 badges on my lapels if I wear a suit or whatever. One is Mickey Mouse and one is Donald Duck. Just to remind me what Disney said about, getting too full of yourself. It's all Mickey Mouse, listen. Yeah. And second of all, these guys never got married, never had kids. They don't know what they're talking about, but it's good. They can get you to enjoy being yourself,
Yeah, awesome answer. What if you could be known for one thing? What would it be?
We've been known for one thing. I think it's for the Looper app that we've developed.
Yeah.
I set out with a wonderful woman called Amanda Hart, and we developed this app called Be a Looper, free to air. It's a design we launched in October to try to reduce, based on relatedness, based on chain diffusion, to reduce the suicide risk around the world, to reduce the number of suicides. And we just released it quietly on the Apple Store, iTunes, everywhere else. Within 4 days or so, it had gone viral in more than 50 countries, 160 cities. As far as we know, there are about 17,000 lives that have been altered positively by this, and millions of contacts. And I just think out of everything I've ever done, I think this could be the kind of crowning achievement would be to reduce the rates of suicide around the world.
Yeah.
In my personal practice as a psychologist, I've never lost a patient to suicide, and I'm hoping that run of luck will continue.
Yeah.
But central to that theme was the idea, can we get across to millions of people in the world who have mental health problems, get them to stay in the loop with 5 people around them? And if I could be remembered for anything, that would be something I'd like.
Yeah. It's a great answer. So the final rapid fire question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice when you first started working, or maybe at university, what would your advice be to yourself?
Don't think you know anything until after you're qualified. Because nothing I learned in 15 years at university and all the degrees and everything else prepared me for the real world. Everything we do is a body contact sport. And everything you learn in isolation or in abstract doesn't really count. So what I've learned from working with people, they've taught me everything that I know. I haven't learned anything from books really, apart from what I've tested out with people. That would be my advice. Don't think you know anything until way after you've qualified.
Yeah, that's great advice. What's in store for the next 12 months for yourself?
So I'm working with a group in the UK called Box Spring Invest in Entertainment. We're working with Academy Award-winning, global Golden Globe award-winning people with Claire Munn and Alistair Munn and Amy Radford, Robert Redford's daughter, working to produce the best possible goods for the 21st century workplace. Working with Amanda Hart at Social Innovations to create an enterprise version of the Looper app so that people within the workplace can keep track of everybody who works for them and know exactly how they're tracking every single day. So that's really good. Working with Mobicom in Australia to further the reach of our diabetes control app, of the Work Life Hub app, to begin to work with some really good rehab groups in Australia. There are about 30 different avenues opening up at the moment, but these are the ones I'm most excited about. And obviously to continue to work with patients in the private practice, which is always just an amazing source of both income and satisfaction and mastery.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Not that I always get it right, but what the hell, it's fairly good even when I think I'm failing.
Awesome. And finally, where can people get in contact with you? Where's the best place to reach you?
So my website is www.roysugarman.com. If you just Google me, it's the first thing that comes up, and I have contact details there. And I have phone numbers there for America, phone numbers for Australia, where I live, and it's very easy to get hold of me.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put
the books themselves are all on Amazon and iBooks and everywhere else, so it's very easy to get the books and download them.
Yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes for the listeners, but just like to thank you and acknowledge for all your work, Roy. It's been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you. So thanks very much for joining us.
Adam, thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.